What if I told you that reaching $2 million in retirement savings isn't actually the finish line, but rather the moment when everything you thought you knew about money gets turned completely upside down? For decades, you've been conditioned to save, accumulate, and grow your wealth. You've deferred gratification, maximized contributions, and watched those numbers climb. But here's the paradox nobody talks about. The moment you finally achieve financial abundance, your brain, the same brain that got you here, becomes your biggest obstacle. Today, we're diving deep into what psychologists and financial experts call the decumulation paradox. And trust me, what you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you think about retirement wealth. Stick around, because by the end of this video, I'll reveal why 70% of wealthy families lose everything by the second generation, and how you can avoid becoming part of that statistic. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. You're probably going to die with most of your money unspent. Research shows that retirees with substantial assets, we're talking multi-million-dollar portfolios, retain roughly 80% of their pre-retirement savings even after 2 decades of retirement. Think about that. 20 years of what should be your golden years, and you're still sitting on the vast majority of your wealth. But why? Here's where it gets fascinating. For 40 years, you've been running a very specific program in your mind. Save, accumulate, compound. Every dollar spent felt like a betrayal of your future self. This saver's mentality was your superpower during the accumulation phase. It's what got you to $2 million in the first place. But now, that same mentality has become a psychological prison. There's a concept in behavioral finance called loss aversion, and it explains everything. Studies consistently show that the psychological pain of losing a dollar is approximately twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining one. So when you're in retirement and you need to start withdrawing from your portfolio, your brain doesn't process this as using your resources. Instead, it registers it as a loss, a painful, irreversible mistake. This creates what experts call decumulation anxiety, a specific form of cognitive dissonance where spending money feels inherently wrong, regardless of how much you actually have. You could have $5 million in the bank and still feel anxious about buying a business class ticket or upgrading your kitchen. But here's something even more surprising about this psychological trap, and it has to do with a peculiar behavioral pattern that causes affluent retirees to actually become more frugal as their wealth increases. We'll unpack that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about why your emotions around money are about to get even more complicated. Here's a strange quirk of human psychology. Retirees will spend roughly 80% of their guaranteed income. Things like Social Security, pensions, or annuity payments, but only a tiny fraction of their investment portfolio. Why the dramatic difference? Because guaranteed income feels replenishable, while portfolio assets feel depletable. Think about your old paycheck. It arrived like clockwork every 2 weeks or every month. You didn't agonize over spending it because you knew another one was coming. But your investment portfolio? That feels finite, permanent. Once you spend it, it's gone forever. This is why many high net worth retirees adopt what's called an income-only strategy. They'll only spend the dividends and interest their portfolio generates, refusing to touch the principal. Psychologically, this feels safer because the nest egg stays intact. But here's the problem. In low-yield environments, this approach forces unnecessary lifestyle contractions. You're artificially limiting yourself based on an arbitrary rule that has no basis in actual financial reality. The smarter approach? What experts call the paycheck replacement model. You structure fixed, automated monthly distributions from your investment portfolio directly to your checking account. Same amount, same day, every month, just like a salary. This simple psychological hack transforms the painful act of selling investments into the passive receipt of income. You're not making a decision to spend every month. The decision has already been made. The money just appears. Now, let's talk about something that completely destroys the traditional retirement calculator models. Something researchers call the retirement spending smile. Most retirement planning assumes your spending will increase at a constant rate, typically matching inflation. But reality? It's far more complex, especially for high net worth individuals. Your retirement spending actually follows a U-shaped curve with three distinct phases. The go-go years. This is roughly ages 65 to 75. You're healthy, energetic, and hungry to capitalize on your newfound freedom. This is when spending often matches, or even exceeds your pre-retirement levels. You're taking those dream trips, buying that second home, exploring hobbies you've deferred for decades. This surge in spending is frequently underestimated in traditional planning models. The slow-go years, ages 75 to 85, represent the trough of the spending curve. Health naturally slows. The novelty of retirement travel wears off. You're not as eager for adventurous vacations. Real spending tends to decline by approximately 1% per year during this phase. The no-go years, age 85 and beyond. This is where spending accelerates again, but not for fun reasons. Healthcare costs, assisted living, long-term care, concierge medical services, these expenses can dwarf your earlier discretionary spending. But here's what makes this even more complicated for the wealthy. The spending smile for high net worth individuals has a very different shape than for average retirees. And understanding this difference could mean the difference between confidently enjoying your wealth and dying with millions left on the table. But before we get there, there's a hidden inflation trap that's silently destroying retirement plans. Standard retirement calculators use something called the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. It measures the cost of an average basket of goods: milk, bread, housing, basic health care. But let me ask you something. Is your lifestyle average? High net worth individuals face what economists call luxury lifestyle inflation, and it runs significantly hotter than standard CPI. Let's break this down. Concierge medicine and premium healthcare services. They're rising at 7.5% to 8.5% annually, roughly double standard medical inflation. These services provide 24/7 physician access, same-day appointments, and comprehensive wellness programs that wealthy retirees increasingly prioritize. High-end travel, wellness retreats, and experiential luxury. Annual price increases ranging from 6.7% to 11.6%, far outpacing general inflation. And here's the kicker. The services you'll rely on most: domestic staff, private drivers, personal assistants. These labor-intensive services historically inflate faster than goods. Then there are what planners call lumpy expenses, irregular, massive capital outflows that can devastate your portfolio if they coincide with market downturns. Funding grandchildren's education, purchasing vacation properties, the bank of mom and dad loans to adult children. These aren't monthly line items you can easily model. They're financial earthquakes that require sophisticated planning. Now, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. The single largest expense most high net worth retirees face. And no, it's not healthcare, it's not housing, it's taxes. For many affluent retirees, taxes exceed food, healthcare, and housing combined. Here's why. That beautiful tax-deferred account you've been building for decades, it's actually a tax time bomb waiting to detonate. Starting at age 73, soon to be 75, required minimum distributions force you to withdraw a percentage of your traditional IRA and 401k balance, regardless of whether you actually need the income. For a multi-million-dollar IRA, this can force hundreds of thousands of dollars onto your tax return, pushing you into the highest marginal brackets, 37% federal plus state taxes. But it gets worse. High modified adjusted gross income triggers something called IRMAA, income-related monthly adjustment amounts. This dramatically increases your Medicare Part B and D premiums. We're talking potential increases of 3.5 times the base rate. And these thresholds are cliffs. Exceeding them by even $1 can trigger thousands in additional annual costs. Then there's the 3.8% net investment income tax that applies to investment income once your MAGI exceeds $250,000 for married couples. So what's the solution? So, the most powerful weapon against future tax liability is the Roth conversion. But timing is everything. The optimal window sits between retirement, when your W-2 wages stop, and age 73 when RMDs begin. During these gap years, your taxable income is often artificially low. This is your opportunity. The strategy is called bracket filling. You convert just enough traditional IRA assets to Roth IRA assets to fill up lower tax brackets, say the 22% or 24% bracket, without crossing into higher tax territory. You're essentially prepaying taxes at today's rates rather than tomorrow's potentially higher rates. This accomplishes three things. First, it reduces the balance that will be subject to RMDs later. Second, it creates a pool of tax-free money for retirement. Third, and this is huge for legacy planning, Roth IRAs pass income tax-free to heirs. For philanthropically inclined retirees, there's another powerful tool: qualified charitable distributions. Once you're over 70 and a half, you can donate up to $105,000 directly from your IRA to qualified charities. This satisfies your RMD requirement without counting as taxable income. And unlike standard charitable deductions, it lowers your adjusted gross income, protecting you from those brutal IRMAA surcharges. Let me share a strategy that's revolutionizing how sophisticated retirees think about portfolio structure. It's called bucketing, and it's essentially a psychological hack disguised as an investment strategy. Here's how it works. Bucket 1 holds 1 to 3 years of living expenses in cash or ultra-short-term fixed income. This money is completely immune to market volatility. Its sole purpose? Letting you sleep at night. Bucket 2 contains 5 to 7 years of expenses in high-quality bonds and dividend-paying blue-chip stocks. This bucket replenishes Bucket 1 and provides yield. Bucket 3. This is your 10-plus year money. Equities, real estate, potentially private equity. This bucket fights inflation and funds your legacy goals. Why is this so powerful? Because it directly combats two dangerous behavioral biases. Recency bias causes investors to overweight recent market events. If the market crashes 20%, the retiree with a cash bucket knows their lifestyle is secure for multiple years. There's no pressure to sell equities at the bottom. Herd mentality drives investors to follow the crowd during panic. The bucketed retiree has a framework that contradicts the panic, allowing them to remain invested when others are capitulating. So here's what it all comes down to. Reaching $2 million in retirement isn't about whether you have enough money. You probably have more than enough. The real question is this: can you give yourself permission to actually use it? Can you overcome decades of conditioning that tells you spending is wrong? Can you shift from a net worth focus to a cash flow focus? Can you reframe portfolio withdrawals not as losses, but as the entire purpose of why you built this wealth in the first place? Because here's the tragic irony. Research shows that 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation, and 90% by the third. And it's rarely due to market crashes or bad investments. It's because families fail to communicate values, fail to prepare heirs, and fail to actually deploy their wealth strategically during their lifetimes. The successful high net worth retiree isn't just someone who accumulated wealth. They're someone who mastered the far more difficult art of wealth utilization, spending confidently, planning strategically, and building a legacy that extends beyond just the dollars. Everything changes at $2 million because that's when the game flips. The challenge is no longer making money. It's making meaning with it.